A man goes to his GP for a routine checkup. He feels fine, just a bit more tired than usual. His blood pressure is rising, but nothing serious. He wakes up once or twice a night for the toilet. That's part of being an adult, isn't it? A week later, the doctor calls and says, "Your kidneys are only working 30%. That's stage 3B chronic kidney disease. No pain, no warning, just silence." Hello, health champions. Today we discuss how you don't sabotage your kidneys. Your kidneys are great. They filter at least 200 liters of fluid per day. That's about 400 typical water bottles per day. And they also help to regulate essential minerals and fluids in your body. They also play a big role in eliminating toxins, but they can't do that if you sabotage them. Today we discuss the top 10 worst habits that sabotage the kidneys, how you avoid them, and what you can do about it. The first thing your kidneys sabotage is the habit of eating things like bread, especially white bread, but all the bread lets blood sugar spike. Drinking soda, pasta, baked and pressed fruit juices. All these things cause blood sugar spikes in regular use. The problem is that high blood sugar and blood sugar spikes, even temporarily, can cause microvascular damage to the kidneys. They damage the glomeruli of the kidneys, which is the smallest functional unit of the kidneys. It consists of microvessels that are very sensitive, and this micro damage starts to occur long before you have fully developed type 2 diabetes. Scrape these processed foods. Eat unprocessed food instead. For example, think of non-fatty vegetables and all kinds of leafy vegetables, which naturally contain few carbohydrates. You want to eat meat, fish, chicken, and so on. Unprocessed beans. And you want to fill up with good fat. You eat certain things to get enough calories in and get full. Fill up with quality fats, such as butter, extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, rye, and wheat, because blood sugar spikes can cause damage, even if your sober blood sugar is in order. Do you want to measure your A1C? Check this with your blood test. If it is higher than 5.4, you are not in the optimal range for blood sugar. There is a chance that your blood sugar spikes after the meal. What you want to do is keep an eye on these spikes. You do this with a glucometer, a cheap device that you can buy with a small fingerprint. You can check it 60 to 90 minutes after a meal. Or even better, if a doctor can prescribe you a CGM, continuous glucose monitor. Then you can see what your blood sugar does minute by minute during the day. It then shows you a period. What you pay attention to is that your blood sugar should not increase enormously just because you ate. If your sober blood sugar is between 80 and 90, then it should not be above 110 after a meal. If you control your blood sugar well and eat unprocessed food, that is 6.1 millimoles per liter. If your blood sugar rises a little more, comes above 110, but remains below 130, that is a borderline case. This means that you are no longer really good at controlling your blood sugar. You become insulin resistant, and you have a too large fluctuation in your blood sugar. And most doctors would never react to that. They would say that everything up to 150 or even higher. That is perfectly normal after a meal. But that is only because so many people are insulin resistant and eat so much sugar and processed food. So 110 to 130 in millimoles would be 6.1 to 7.2. And if your blood sugar rises above 130 after a meal, then that is too high. That would be above 7.2 millimoles per liter. What you want to do then is understand that there is a problem. These blood sugar peaks can start to damage your kidneys. Choose low-carbohydrate food, as discussed. How many carbohydrates you take depends on your situation. Eat so that you stay below 110. Especially after a while, this does not happen overnight. You reduce your carbohydrates. If it starts to fall, but then rises again, that is above your tolerance level. So keep it below 110 after a meal. The second thing that damages your kidneys is processed food, especially when it contains additives with phosphates, often hidden in cold drinks and dried fruit. Now that is something that many people think is healthy, but it is not just concentrated sugar in dried fruit, but they also add quite a bit of these phosphates. You also find a lot of phosphates in snacks and meat products, but processed food is also very low in nutritional value. They process a lot of the things that are originally in the food, and that your body wants. So they remove nutrients from it, and besides that, it contains other preservatives besides the phosphates. It has other additives and many other synthetic ingredients, such as flavors and enhancers and so on. So this processed food now increases the phosphate load. It contains a lot of unhealthy fats and other toxins that now increase the burden that the kidney must process and detoxify. The solution is, of course, to stop processed food and learn to cook and prepare food at home. If you are used to eating fast food and processed food, this does not happen overnight. Do it as fast as you can and realize the difference. Home-cooked food has a completely different nutritional value. Once you learn how to do it, it tastes so much better. The third way in which you damage your kidneys is by regularly using freely available non-steroidal painkillers. These are substances that contain ibuprofen, naproxen, or diclofenac. These drugs reduce the blood supply and the overall bleeding of the kidney. This cuts off a part of the essential substances that the kidney needs to heal. All the substances, nutrients, and building blocks that are needed are in the blood, and if the kidney now gets less of it, it does not get those substances. And this is especially if you are also dehydrated, because then the total blood volume also decreases. So what you want to do instead of that is, of course, to reduce the burden of inflammation by eating unprocessed food instead of processed food. But in addition, there are a number of things that you can use to control inflammation in a natural way. And one of the most powerful is turmeric. And it is also important to have a good source. I will put a link below. It is actually absorbed and reaches the cells about 40 times more than the turmeric you eat as a spice. Also make sure that you get omega-3 fatty acids, EPA, and DHA. Unless you eat good quality fatty fish at least 3 times a week, such as sardines, salmon, or mackerel. Something else that can help is magnesium. That is easy to get when you eat a large variety of non-fatty vegetables and leafy vegetables. Make sure you get a lot of it, several portions a day. If you don't, I recommend a supplement. Look for a good magnesium supplement or take an electrolyte powder with magnesium. The fourth way your kidneys are damaged is by chronic dehydration. If you don't drink water regularly but mainly rely on coffee, tea, soda, and other drinks, it is as if you are soaking your car and trying to wash it off with something other than pure water. It then doesn't become completely clean, and the unwanted remains remain. In the long term, you increase the concentration of waste and the risk of stone-forming minerals. If there is less water in your body, your blood becomes thicker, there is less blood volume available, and you reduce your filtration efficiency significantly. You can't send enough blood through the kidneys to do their job, and everything becomes more concentrated. The solution is, of course, to drink clean water regularly. If you have a job where you are outside or sweat a lot regularly, it is also a good idea to fill it with electrolytes and make sure it is a good brand that not only contains salt, but also balances all electrolytes. I have made a product called U-Light, and I will put a link below for you. The fifth thing that damages your kidneys is high blood pressure. This is important because a bad kidney can cause high blood pressure, and this high blood pressure further damages the kidneys. But what is a high blood pressure? Generally, they call it a normal blood pressure of 120/80. They want to put you on medication as soon as you reach 121. As soon as you are above 120, they consider that high, or at least 125. But you really only have to worry if it is above 140, because between 120 and 140 there is minimal damage, unless you are very insulin resistant. If you already have a lot of inflammation problems and type 2 diabetes, you have to pay extra attention to it. There are many ways to do this. You can reduce insulin resistance, you can do breathing exercises and so on. And I have made a number of videos about blood pressure. If you are above 140, between 140 and 199, there is an increased risk, especially after a while. But the real danger starts around 160. Then there is clear and consistent damage to your blood vessels and kidneys. And what happens is that there are those microvessels in the kidneys that we talked about, and the high blood pressure creates extra friction on the inside of those blood vessels and damages them because they are very, very small. What then happens is that the surface of these blood vessels hardens and you reduce the ability to filter fluids efficiently. There is also less oxygen supply and a reduced exchange of the necessary substances. This is very important for the kidneys because although the kidneys receive a lot of blood, a huge amount of blood actually goes through the kidneys. The largest part of that blood is not for the kidneys. Only a small part is absorbed and used by the kidneys. And the kidneys are very, very vulnerable to hypoxia, which means a reduction or a lack of oxygen. So even a small variation can already cause damage in the kidneys. So how do we protect the kidneys from a high blood pressure? Well, the most important thing you can do is to reduce insulin resistance, because insulin resistance contributes to a high blood pressure. But insulin resistance also causes inflammation and damage. So the most important thing you can do is to reduce insulin resistance, because it is the most important cause of kidney damage and kidney failure. What about sodium? Sodium does not cause damage, but can maintain high blood pressure. If you already have other problems, you want to pay attention to your sodium and probably reduce it a bit. If you already have chronic kidney disease in stage 2, 3A, and also insulin resistance such as prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, hypertension, reduced kidney filtration, and insulin resistance, then it is time to pay attention to sodium. Stage 2 chronic kidney disease means that your filtration speed has dropped from the normal 90 ml per minute to between 60 and 89 ml per minute. And if you have stage 3, it is divided into 2 parts. For some reason there is 3A and 3B, and 3A means that you are between 45 and 59. You can then have lost half of your kidney capacity. What is really important now to understand is that if you have even more kidney damage, you want to reduce both sodium and potassium considerably, because the things that are good for healthy people are now becoming dangerous. When your kidneys are damaged, they cannot regulate the fluids and minerals as they should. They cannot lose them as they should. And if you are in chronic kidney disease, stage 3B, then you now filter 30 to 44 ml per minute. And this was the example with which I started the video, that very often people do not have significant symptoms even at this point. And if you have kidney damage, if you are in one of these stages, but especially if you are in stage 3B or worse, then you want to work together with a nephrologist so that he can keep a good eye on your potassium and sodium and can regulate your diet in such a way. The 6th thing that damages your kidneys is when you eat a lot of sugar. And then we are not only talking about what it does to your blood sugar, because bread, which is mainly glucose, and rice, which is mainly glucose, can increase your blood sugar much more than even pure sugar, such as table sugar. But the problem with sugar is that for 50% of glucose, and for 50%, it consists of fructose. And what this does is that it causes metabolic damage. We often find this in sauces, in snacks, in juices, in snack bars, often in things that you think are healthy, such as muesli bars or protein bars, which can be filled with sugar. And of course, everything that contains glucose fructose is even a little worse, because it even contains more than 50% fructose. And this fructose will cause metabolic damage and fat infiltration, namely non-alcoholic liver oxidation. But in addition, it increases your uric acid, it increases your inflammation value, and also your triglycerides. And this will disrupt the kidneys and cause reduced filtration. So you put an extra burden on that kidney. And that means that if you have any form of kidney damage that you try to reverse, you want to reduce your sugar intake to practically 0. And the same goes for things like fruit juice, because fruit juice, in terms of sugar, in terms of impact on the kidneys, your organs and your bloodstream, is just as bad as the added table sugar, nutritionally and holistically seen. Fruit is a lot better, but in terms of sugar, which actually puts it in the bloodstream, it's about the same. So you want to focus on berries that are very low glycemic in comparison. If you eat fruit, make sure that it's very low glycemic fruits and avoid fruit juices. The 7th thing that can damage your kidneys or hamper recovery is too much protein. But we have to understand what too much protein is. You don't have to be paranoid about eating animal products. There is a myth that protein damages healthy kidneys. And that is absolutely not true. but there is a real risk if we eat too much. If we push ourselves to eat a lot of protein, and the proteins we eat have to be very lean, that's a problem. And these very lean proteins we find in things like rabbit meat, deer meat, and lean chicken fillet without skin. And if we eat that without added fat, so if you already have kidney damage and your filtration rate, your estimated glomerular filtration rate that you see on your blood test is lower than 60, and you eat a lot of this kind of meat without added fat, then you create too much urea and nitrogen waste. And that becomes a huge extra burden for the kidneys. It becomes a big burden for the kidneys to filter all of that out. And an important reason for this confusion about proteins is that if we do a urine test and we find protein in the urine, that can be a sign of a damaged kidney. So people take this together and think that if there is protein in the urine and the kidney is damaged, the protein must have caused the damage. This is not true because protein does not cause damage. It is a sign of earlier damage. So if you have a leaking kidney, then protein appears in the urine, but the protein does not cause the damage. So instead of filling up with lean protein, you want to eat unprocessed food. And the delicious tasty pieces, chicken, meat, and fish, choose where there is enough fat. You can eat eggs, sardines, grass-fed meat. Or if you really like wild, like rabbit and deer, that's fine. But make sure that you eat enough fat. And if you already have some damage, if your kidney filtration rate is lower than 60 milliliters per minute, then you probably want to moderate your protein intake a bit. You don't have to be completely paranoid, but don't overdo it. And you can also use supplements that can help, that can support the kidneys in healing. And maybe work with a doctor who understands these things, so that he can help you understand what is really going on. And the two supplements that really stand out for kidney support are, in my experience, from Standard Process. They are called Drenamine and Drenatropin PMG. If you have kidney problems and want to try them, I will place a link below for more information. The 8th way you sabotage your kidneys is by ignoring your lab values and not understanding what they are telling you. The eGFR, the estimated glomerular filtration rate, is calculated based on creatinine. It is good as a doctor to help you understand and interpret, but there are factors that you need to know to put that number into context. I have a course about blood values that explains that in more detail. The other value you want to understand is BUN, or blood uremic acid. If it rises, it can also be an indication that your kidneys are lagging behind. And the biggest problem is, if you don't even check it, if you don't let your blood values be measured at all, but also many people have slight increases. They don't really understand what it means. They get their blood output back, and the only thing they know is whether there is a flag or not. But what about the zone in between? What does that mean? So a completely dead kidney filters about 0 and a functioning. A normal good filters about 90. So in between we have different stages, 30 to 60. And optimal would be 90 and higher. And that's interesting enough, what they call stage 1 chronic kidney disease. I don't know why, but 90 and higher is normal. That's where you want to be. Well, below 90 to 60 is what they call stage 2. And this is something that is already stage 2, but it is not marked on your blood output. So you read the blood output, and it seems normal even though it should be 90. So this can get very, very confusing, and you miss the early chance if you don't understand this. The next level is between 59 and 45. We call that 3A. And then 30 to 45 is 3B. And below that we have stage 4 from 15 to 30 and stage 5 between 0 and 15, when the kidney is almost completely expired. If you don't understand these nuances and how strange they call this stage, you can just, like the man in the introduction, discover that you have no symptoms. But one day you find out that you are in stage 3, and you miss the early chance to easily do something about it. I advise at least once a year to have a blood test done. Whatever you do, don't just look at the lab results and whether there is a flag. Whatever value you get, follow them closely and compare them with optimal values. The 9th way you sabotage your kidneys is with chronic stress and insufficient sleep. It may be that you are chronically angry, or you are constantly worried. You have a lot of irritation. You are often frustrated. You often feel overwhelmed. These are the worst because they are associated with negative emotions. But there are also people who feel good about what they do, but their candle burns on both sides. They just go on and never allow themselves a break. And what happens is that you increase your cortisol levels, your body then turns into the sympathetic dominant state, which will change all the priorities in your body in terms of healing. That stress will also cause a higher blood pressure, which is bad for your kidneys. You will also have insulin resistance and chronic inflammation. That is why it is so important to take stress and sleep seriously, not just to continue and think, I will save it for another year, because it requires his toll. And we have to understand how important it is, and we have to make it a priority to sleep. We have to make certain bedtimes a priority and allow ourselves enough sleep. And besides that, we have to learn techniques to switch off that stress reaction, because you can have a moment of stress and then you create all those stress chemicals in the body. But if you don't know how to turn it off, your body can hold that stress reaction for hours. While if you know a few simple techniques, such as breathing exercises, you just breathe a few times for a minute or two, and you have that stress reaction, all those chemicals fully reset to their base level. And as part of a healthy lifestyle, you also want to see if you can add some meditation, some exercise, and get a lot of sunlight and exposure to nature, which is very healthy. And the 10th way you sabotage your kidneys is if you have insulin resistance, but you don't do anything about it, or if you just ignore it. Or maybe you don't really understand what it is. Many people don't understand how to measure it. They don't understand what it does to the kidneys, and they don't know how to solve it. Insulin resistance is therefore the most important cause of kidney failure. It is also the most important cause of blindness and amputations, but it is the most important cause of kidney failure. It starts to cause damage long before you have fully developed type 2 diabetes. For decades, they have been hyper-focused on your blood sugar. They monitor diabetes on the basis of blood sugar. But by the time your blood sugar rises, you have already lost 10-15 years that you could have used to turn back time. By the time your blood sugar is high, you already have the complete problem. You can follow it with blood sugar, but also with HbA1c, a 3-month average. More importantly, you follow it with insulin and a calculation called HOMA-ER, Homeostatic Model Assessment of Insulin Resistance. And it is not that complicated. I have made some videos about it. But what it does, it measures both insulin and blood glucose. You put it in a formula and not only look at blood glucose, but how hard the body has to work, how much insulin is needed to keep blood sugar under control. That is the true measure for insulin resistance. If you follow it like this, you will discover it decades before you have fully developed type 2 diabetes. The next problem is that most people do not know how to solve it. A large part of it is that official bodies, such as the American Diabetes Association and the National NEAR Foundation, still promote the food exchange pyramid. They have given it a new name, reformatted it, but still advise to eat a lot of grains and to get 50 to 60% of your calories from carbohydrates. And that is far too much. It can work for an active, young, healthy person. It can go well for a long time and maybe never cause a problem. But if you have insulin resistance and kidney problems, you don't want to eat like that. You want to lower your carbohydrates and move more, so you basically want to reduce all your sugars, or almost all your calories. You can have a few grams per day, like in besan, or a few pieces of pure chocolate. That's the sugar, and you have to keep it below 10 grams or less. You want to reduce your carbohydrates, so scrape, in principle, all your grains and starch. You can still eat carbohydrates, but then leafy vegetables and not starch-rich vegetables. Take healthy proteins and fill them with enough fat until you are saturated. In this way, you reduce insulin resistance. The recipe is different for different people because we are all unique and different. By monitoring and learning these values, you discover how many carbohydrates are suitable for you. If you like this video, you will also love it. Do you want to improve your health by understanding how the body works? Subscribe, press the bell, and turn on notifications so you never miss a life-saving video.